Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Topic with a lot of answers today. Let's do it. What is the worst rare mental disorder? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Body integrity disorder, BIID, describes the extremely rare phenomenon of persons who desire the amputation of one or more healthy limbs or who desire a paralysis. Some of these persons mutilate themselves. Others ask surgeons for an amputation or for the transection of their spinal cord. It may not be the worst, but a kid I knew in school had trichotillomania, which is basically compulsive hair pulling. He had large patches of hair missing, and I just remember feeling sorry for him because he couldn't stop himself. I'm not sure if this counts, but fatal familial insomnia. One day you just never sleep again. Very rare and genetic. People with new insomnia swear they have it, and it's posted all the time on the insomnia sub and drives me crazy. Capgras syndrome. A delusional disorder where individuals believe that their loved ones or familiar people have been replaced by imposters. Fregoli delusion. Individuals with this disorder believe that different people are actually the same person in disguise, often leading to paranoid and persecutory thoughts. Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Munchausen is bad enough, but in Munchausen by proxy, it's typically a parent who triggers an illness or symptoms in a kid, searches medical attention, and then gets to be the caring caregiver, meaning the kid suffers a lot from it. Eating disorders suck. Imagine you're a recovering heroin addict, and you've got to put a needle full of heroin up to your vein 3 times a day. Or you're a recovering alcoholic who has to put a shot of liquor up to your mouth at least 3 times a day, every day for the rest of your life. And if you stop doing this, you relapse and might die. That's basically eating disorder recovery. And on top of that, Western culture's attitude toward dieting food and weight, and it becomes even harder. I had anorexia, so while I was going through all of the above, I would also effectively hallucinate every time I looked in the mirror, which would only make me want to re-engage in the eating disorder. Treatment is unbelievably expensive and hard to access, too. There's a reason eating disorders are the deadliest mental illness. Certain cases of hallucinogen persistent perception disorder. It is a rare side effect of taking a psychedelic drug like LSD, also known as a permanent trip. It has varied degrees of severity and distress levels, but some people are basically stuck in a bad trip for years. Terrifying hallucinations and delusions. I have a mild version from psychedelic mushrooms that isn't distressing, but is persistent and distracting. I basically see mild visual distortions all the time, shapes moving and waving, seeing fractals, more colorful lights, etc. There was a woman who lost her sense of proprioception, i.e. the body's sense of itself. The way she described it is horrifying. I can't identify with that graceful girl anymore. She's gone. I can't remember her. I can't even imagine her. It's like something's been scooped right out of me, right at the center. That's what they do with frogs, isn't it? They scoop out the center, the spinal cord. They pith them. That's what I am, pithed. Like a frog. Step up, come see Chris, the first pith human being. She's no proprioception, no sense of herself. Disembodied Chris, the Pyth girl. DID. It's really well misunderstood. People think they do it for attention, and very few are familiar with it. I had a cousin who had it. When we were in middle school, she had 6 personalities. Upon going to school, kids and adults don't understand and bullied her. She gets support, but the fragility of her mental health led to her to create more personalities, to the point that her real self barely comes out. It's very tragic. Her final personality was a suicidal 34-year-old transgender. Killed herself by drinking gasoline. She passed away 5 years ago. She was a very kind person. Her other personalities cared for me too. They really cared for me and my brother. Depersonalization. There are worse out there, but this is one I suffer from time to time. Being in your body and completely don't recognize it, and having separate outer thoughts is miserable. I'm lucky because it's a short time event, few hours, but it's scary and very unpleasant. Don't wish it on my worst enemy. Alien hand syndrome sounds pretty frightening to me. It's when you believe that one of your hands has a mind of its own and acts without you being able to stop or control it. People who have this medical condition have a hand that often acts contrary to their own intentions. I've seen a video of someone whose hand had a firm grip around the throat and tried to strangle the person while he was fighting to remove the hand with the other hand. Super scary. What's it called when you wake up every day with a soul-crushing sense of disappointment over how mediocre your life has turned out, and you just want to sleep until everything is over, but you're unable to do anything about it because you have a commitment to your loved ones and can't just quit because you feel like it? What's the name of that constant, everlasting condition? ARFID, or Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, is one of the worst eating disorders. My best friend has or had it and spent 19 years of her life unable to figure out why she hated eating, and every meal made her nauseous and miserable. Eventually it got so bad to the point that her body refused to digest food, so she vomited 10 plus times a day just trying to get the bare minimum nutrients for survival. Ended up in the hospital at around 80 pounds and went to an eating disorder treatment facility and is looking more beautiful and healthy than ever. Truman Syndrome, wherein the sufferer always perceives or feels an audience is watching their every move, even if no people are present. OCD. Now you might think, oh, I've heard that everywhere. But that's the problem. So many of them are just, oh, I have to organize things because of my OCD, tee-hee. That's not what OCD is. It's obsessive compulsive disorder, not organizer crazy disorder. Do many people pretend to have it, and it sucks, because you want to know the truth about OCD? When talking about the worst disorders, you cannot bring OCD. When talking about the worst disorders, you can't not bring OCD. It's one of the most misunderstood disorders in all of history, and still is today. It's almost impossible to treat, even with medication. It bleeds into every aspect of your life, infecting every single thought and action and corrupting it. Let me try to put this into perspective. You know how some disorders can cause or related to depression? OCD, however, depression is a symptom, not an effect, not a tag-along. One of the most impactful mental issues in our society today. Reduced to a single name on a list of effects and hardships from the little devil inside your head. And that's not even scratching the surface. We haven't even touched the surface. There is not one that can be pointed and, marked as worst. There is a lot of bias around the dissociative disorder, multiple personality disorder. They just added it to the DSM, but still, a lot of psychiatrists don't believe in it. Also, you could add to that any of the personality disorders, while not rare, they're still really bad. Curious to see what other people think, though. Misophonia. This is a very rare mental disorder condition characterized by a very strong emotional or physiological reaction to certain sounds. People with misophonia may experience intense feelings of irritation, anger, anxiety, or disgust. These sounds can vary widely from person to person, but commonly include chewing, slurping, breathing, or tapping noises. Guilty. Graves' disease. An overactive thyroid can make you so hyper that you do irrational things. People used to be locked in mental institutions for it, as there was formerly no diagnosis or treatment. Now it's controlled with medication, can confirm. I had it and was so hyper I couldn't sleep for weeks. Was cleaning the house at 3 a.m. Eventually, without treatment, your heart gives out because it beats so fast. Also not rare, but panic disorder. I'll never forget my first panic attack. I already felt anxious that day, but all of a sudden I got a horrible feeling inside my body. I couldn't breathe. My heart rate was so high, nausea, diarrhea, tingling inside my fingers, chest pain. Felt like I was dying. CTE. But it's not rare, just rarely diagnosed, and only diagnosed upon death. Degenerative brain damage caused by concussions. First, you lose control of your emotions, immediate anger, no ability to say, let me step back and examine the situation. Then memory loss. Then you lose all impulse control. Your first thoughts, you do them. Yelling at people, punching people, drugs, drinking. Then you lose control of your bodily functions. Tremors, vertigo, swallowing, walking, incontinence. My brother had it. Diagnosed after death at stage 2. During striking moments of lucidity, he would sob and tell our mom, there's something in my head. I feel like Cotard's delusion has got to be up there. In short, people who suffer with it insist that they are actually dead or immortal despite any intervention. People with this disorder usually do end up dead due to starvation or dehydration because they refuse all food and water, reasoning that they are dead and therefore don't need it. If I recall correctly, it is one of, if not the rarest mental disorders known to science. My dad has Huntington's disease. I'm always having to explain to people what it is. The nerves in your brain break down, and it's like having ALS, Parkinson's, and dementia all at once. And it can come with schizophrenia. There isn't a cure, and brain stops talking to your muscles until you can't swallow and choke, or your heart doesn't beat anymore. Schizophrenia hands down. You feel like a giant dark hole inside of you is going to swallow you up, and you desperately do anything your sick mind tells you to do to try to prevent it. You spend every minute of every day scared. Because of this, schizos won't reliably stay on meds. They think you're trying to control them for bad reasons with it, making it virtually impossible for them to get any relief from their fears. Hands down, dementia. It doesn't care if you're a brilliant professor at Harvard or a cashier at Walmart. When it comes for you, you will be rendered helpless, and your death will be slow and painful. At the beginning stages, many people understand that they're dying, and that there's nothing they can do about it. There's no cure. There likely won't ever be one. Scientists have been saying they're close for decades, but it's always out of reach. Agoraphobia. I have a cousin with agoraphobia, and his life is an absolute hell. He's completely dependent on his family to support him. He hasn't left his house in 8 years other than to address a medical problem. Otherwise, he's completely stuck. The worst part of all is that he trusts absolutely nobody. People have told him over and over that they will help him, and he constantly gets let down. They either don't help them and only said they'd help in order to feel like they're a good person, or the help they give him is barely anything at all and often comes with a cost. Another aspect of his phobia issues is emotophobia, which is a fear of nausea and or vomiting. This is the main reason why he can't leave his house. The moment he does, he's overcome with a severe feeling of nausea. He becomes hyper aware of his surroundings, and his imagination takes over to the point where leaves on the ground start to look like vomit. We watch movies and play games together, and before I recommend anything, I need to go check doesthisdogdie.com to make sure he won't have issues. We made the mistake once where we rewatched The Sixth Sense, and the ghost girl in the tent triggered him, and he had to run to the bathroom. And because of this phobia, he'll never have children, he's not able to care for pets, and I fear the day when he's not able to help someone because they're vomiting, or worse, he has to go to the hospital for his own emergency. He's been like this for 22 years, too. He's tried medication, therapists, and so much more, yet has had zero progress. The most that happens is that he gets a few months break, but then it comes rolling back the moment something triggers him again. And he's tried to expose himself through those triggers to help desensitize. And that doesn't work either. He spent 4 months absolutely suffering through college after things came back and nothing improved. An old friend and I were reconnecting on Facebook after decades, and it turns out he's in the exact same spot I am, except he's still in with the hard drugs and he fully hallucinates. His diagnosis is BPD with bipolar, and mine's schizoaffective. He's like, I get upset. You'd be surprised. I report 3 people yesterday online. I told him not surprised at all. I'm currently blocked from posting to my own profile. Weirdly, we were confessing to relative victories, given how minor they were. It was also weird because if it had been anyone else cold approaching me like that, forget it. We hadn't had a real conversation since the 20th century, but he's not just an old friend, he's a brother in arms. You have to be in that spot to understand that. There was a question here a few days ago, something about terrorist threats. I'm like, yeah, I knew someone who made one, blew up over the phone and threatened a pharmacy worker. A different friend with the same diagnosis I have. Man, I had to jump off that thread right away and delete all my thoughts. That was vicious. I'm like, I know he had to do time, but dude's schizoaffective. I was just digging myself in deeper though. The rest of the world doesn't get it. If you're constantly exploding, your love is to be mild to your surroundings, as much as possible, and then do whatever time behind whichever locked door society tells you. You have no choice but to wait it out. You have to. Trichodexaloxalism is a psychological condition characterized by a literal and overwhelming need to consider everything around them or themselves on a 33rd level. People with this condition may see hidden subtexts in ordinary situations, seek connections between every action or consequences on a cosmic level, and look for symbolism and deep meaning in everyday occurrences. In general, trichodecacautionists may feel disconnected from reality and constantly live in a world of their own mysteries and riddles. PMDD. As far as I know, it's not rare, but no doctor, therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist I've talked to know about it. It's a disorder that makes you depressed, anxious, hopeless, angry, dysphoric, and hate yourself from ovulation to menstruation every single month. Then you get your period and slowly start to feel like yourself again for about a week, and then ovulation comes around again and you're back in hell. There's no cure, no treatment, and no one takes it seriously. People have left their partners, lost jobs, left their families, or even committed suicide because of it. I have it, and it makes life very hard. Chronic motor tic disorder. I was diagnosed with it as a child. I have repetitive actions that I couldn't stop doing. I would constantly blink my eyes and clear my throat. My dad found it incredibly annoying, so he sent me to a therapist. Nice. They can't get rid of it. It's basically Tourette's without the verbal tic. But after excessive therapy, I was able to migrate the tics to less visible places, specifically contracting my stomach muscles. 20 years ago, someone asked me to demonstrate my old tics. That was a personal hell. I could start them back up easily. It took hours to migrate them back again. I'm functional with them migrated, although my stomach is perpetually tender. My wife says she didn't notice them initially, but once we started sharing a bed, they became super obvious. Now she hardly notices them. But yeah, I need to twitch my stomach all day every day, but it used to be much worse. Mania induced psychosis. Literally, you're so happy and so full of energy that you snap and get fun things like paranoia, delusions, and even hallucinations. Normally happens when things are going way too well for someone. As in, hey, you won the lotto or got a promotion you were sure was not yours. Now your brain is broken, and anyone who tries to point it out is obviously part of the evil group trying to stop you.